All right. I think we are live now. It looks like we are. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us on the first live stream of Doubtful Conversations. I've recorded interviews and recorded videos, and honestly, live streaming is a little nerve-wracking for me because with editing and pre-recording, you can edit things out and stuff like that, but it was just taking up way too much of my time, and a lot of these other YouTubers are doing live streaming, so I thought I'd hop on the bandwagon, and so I'm excited about our live stream today. Just so you know, and I'll mention this a couple other times for other people that are hopping on, if you have questions for either Alex or myself today as we go on, just put that in the live chat, either on Facebook or on YouTube, and we'll do our best to answer whatever questions you guys might have. But we'll go ahead and get started, and if you jump in on the middle of this, I think you'll catch on pretty quick. Also, if you are watching this recorded, like if you're not watching this live, you're going back and watching everything that we reference in this video, links or books or whatnot, I'll link to in the description of this video on YouTube, so you can find those pretty quickly. But I'm excited to have tonight our guest, Alex McElroy. He's a pastor and apologist up in the Chicago area, correct, Alex?
Yep, I am in Chicago and in the city, so I'm in it.
Nice. And it's probably much colder there than it is here, I would assume.
Yes, it's I mean, when I say it's not that bad, that's relative, right?
Yeah, it's like 45 or 50 right now here, I think, and it feels a little chilly to me. So
yeah, we're about 35, so not too much different.
Okay, all right, that's not bad. That's not bad. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I'm excited because Alex and I actually we met 4 or 5 years ago, probably.
Yeah.
We
were at 17.
Yeah, we were at the Cross-Examined Instructor Academy Apologetics Conference out in Costa Mesa, California. They've since moved it, I think, to Dallas, which isn't near as exciting as Costa Mesa. But we went out there, and we were both kind of new into the apologetics world and just kind of getting our feet wet, and had a good time out there. And Alex, I know you've been back to that conference a couple times since then. Is that right?
Yeah, I went two. So I did another one, and then I did the advanced one. Hey, real quick.
Yeah.
I don't see it on the YouTube.
Oh, you don't? Okay. Let's see. Oh, nope. You don't see it on. Looks like the broadcast was deleted from YouTube. To stream on YouTube, create a new broadcast, or just remove this destination from the broadcast and then re-add it. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and do that while we're rocking and rolling here. So, Alex, why don't you? I don't want to spend too much time on this because I know our viewers want to get into the kind of the nitty gritty of everything we're doing. But why don't you spend a few minutes and just kind of tell everyone about yourself, kind of what you do, and where you are right now?
Yeah. Well, first, thanks for having me. Glad to be here and glad to reconnect from our time there. So I now am kind of, I guess, a full-time apologist / speaker, but I'm also co-pastoring a house church. I have some other jobs that I have worked in connection with either youth or just trying to be present in different ways where people who don't come to church can still interact with a Christian who can help them in some ways. So one job I do is called Marketplace Chaplains, where I'm essentially an on-site chaplain at several different businesses, like grocery store or hotel, places you wouldn't think of.
Yeah.
But I think that's where we need to go to engage with people who may not come to your church. And so I think that's, we'll get into that more, but I think that's really important as we get into this.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's we're kind of in a time period in evangelism and whatnot where apologetics is so necessary, and yet we'll talk about this here in a few minutes. But I think we're at a huge deficit of pastors who have a pastor's heart, but also understand the importance of apologetics and the role that plays in helping people grow in their walk with the Lord.
Absolutely.
So Alex is also an author of a wonderful, wonderful book. I have a copy in my office, and I forgot to bring it in here with me. But it's a blueprint for Bible basics. Is that right, Alex? Tell us a little bit
Correct.
about that book and what people can expect from that.
So I wrote that book in my time in youth ministry. So I'm a former youth pastor as well,
Nice.
former youth leader, in different ways. And so I was talking with, so the guy that I co-pastor the house church with now was the youth pastor at this time. And we just started to see some inconsistencies with the youth. And when I say youth, I mean teens. They're going to get saved every week at the altar again. And we're like, something's getting lost here in translation. So he asked me to write something specifically to address that. And in so doing, I said, let me just cover all the basics. And it turned into this thing called the foundation class. The foundation class was like a 6-week thing that we took every teen through. And that also any new teens that would come, they would have to go through this if they ever wanted to serve in the youth ministry. So it covered like who is God, what do we know about the Bible? And this is before I even knew what apologetics was. So it was just, it's interesting how God connected the dots. There was some stuff I had read on my own, but I was not like in it to that degree. What is prayer? And so all these kind of basic fundamental things. And then I said, maybe every youth ministry could benefit from this. And so I worked with somebody, and that book is a very stripped down version of what was in this 6-week course. I actually need to do a part 2, a book number 2, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. So,
very cool.
Yeah. But that if you have a teenager, if you have actually not just teenagers, because I've had a lot of adults who are new to the faith get it. And it's because it's very foundational. We're not talking about tongues and baptism and all that stuff. It's just, what is the Bible? What do we know about it? What is prayer? How do I pray? Why should I pray? Those types of things.
I think it's the foundations are very important, and we can get so caught up in these secondary issues. And I just did an interview with a gentleman by the name of Dr. Joshua Swamidas, who's a scientist, and we were talking about how we can get so caught up in these secondary issues of evolution and age of the earth and all of that we miss the big picture, like the important things. And I know a lot of Christians know a lot about kind of these minor secondary issues, but a lot of us are a little, we're ignorant on some of the basics. And so if you if you want to know more about the basics of the Bible, or more so than that, I think if you're a Christian and you want to have a tool that you can use to walk with other believers through things in Scripture and whatnot, new believers, check out Blueprint for Bible Basics. Again, I'll link to it in the description of the video, and you should definitely check that out. I'm still trying to get this up on YouTube, and I am not figuring out how to do that.
Yeah.
So
at this point, you might have to upload it later, because I think.
We'll do that. Let's upload it later. And it looks like we've got some folks joining us on Facebook, which is fantastic. So, Alex, you've kind of talked already a little bit about how you got into apologetics, but this channel is really, I use apologetics to help Christians through doubt. I think a lot of times in the apologetics world, we're so focused on atheists and atheism, and there's a lot of atheists out there, and that's important. But as a pastor, and I'm sure you would agree, Alex, most of the practical ways in which I use apologetics are with other believers who are really struggling with these questions, like how could a good God allow bad things to happen to me and stuff like that. So I'd be curious, and I think our viewers would be curious too, before we get started, would you mind sharing just a little bit about your kind of maybe your journey with doubt and what that's looked like for you and how you've navigated through that?
Absolutely. And what you said is so true, that there's sometimes where when you're in these apologetics circles or world, it can not always, but it can become so heady that we miss the relational aspect. And I'm actually thankful for the way I came into apologetics. So now I have my own conference I do called the Proof for the Truth Conference. I have a nonprofit called the Proof for the Truth. And I've finally formalized this thing into something legitimate as I've been building up. But prior to that, I was in ministry for years before I ever heard the word apologetics. And it didn't diminish my ability to teach the Bible. So I don't want people to think that you have to get all these different lessons and trainings and read all these books. And now you should do those things, but that's not required for you to go to minister or to be with somebody, to do as the Bible says, to weep with those who weep, to serve those in need, and to do these things that we should all be doing anyway. So let me say this idea of doubt has so often been mistaught or just mistaught that it has hampered the growth of many believers. And here's what I mean. You know, when we tell people God doesn't like doubt or fear, faith can't live where doubt is present, right?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not trying to have doubt, but I do have a question, right? That's a normal human thing. And so often, instead of having a safe space to come and talk, which should be the church or should be the pastor, should be the minister, where one can simply ask questions, maybe not even out of disbelief, but just honest questions. Maybe you want clarification on something. And I've seen times and I've heard times where people have told me that it's been shut down because they're appealing to this, well, just bolster your faith and then the doubt will go away. Right.
Yeah.
But that's not always the reality. So that, I think, is an initial jump off point where we as church leaders, regardless of your title position, we have to come with that kind of understanding that, look, if we really believe this, then there are answers. That being said, we should never shy away from people's genuine questions. I don't mean these kind of gotcha questions, but I mean the genuine questions.
Right.
Now, for me personally, I don't remember, because I came to faith at a young age. I don't remember doubting God's existence per se. My parents were taught us a lot, and we saw things and we heard. So I had evidence. You know, we talk about evidence in apologetics. I had evidence. I just didn't have the cosmological argument, right? Which you don't necessarily need. But I have questioned why God allowed certain things to transpire. Why does it feel like he's not as close as I want him to be? Go ahead.
Yeah. And don't you think that is by far the most common kind of doubt that believers in the church face? Like, I don't know about your church, but like the people that I walk with and whatnot, I haven't encountered a lot of Christians who are like doubting whether or not God actually exists. I think I encounter a lot of people who are doubting how in the world a good God could allow X, Y, or Z to happen or something like that. So is that kind of what you're talking about?
Absolutely. And one point I was going to, it's valid now. So I think there's several reasons that people typically tend to doubt. And sometimes, and I say this is probably even more common as an apologist, because we know certain philosophical answers, we miss the real underlying issue. So a lot of times people doubt because of moral or volitional reasons, not intellectual.
Can you explain just for our viewers what you mean by volitional?
Yeah, so that is of the will. It is of your intentionality. And so the distinction I would make is a lot of times the moral dilemma or the moral doubt creeps in because there's either something that somebody wants to do or has already done that they know God will not approve of.
Right.
Based on their teaching, based on what they've been taught of the Bible. So I need a loophole. That's kind of where the thinking goes. So there's some kind of either moral failure or certain lifestyle choice that they don't believe will be affirmed by a church or pastor or the Bible. So now I want to figure out how I can have my cake and eat it too, right?
Yeah.
Now the volitional is similar, but it's more of I'm just not willing to be all in, or I'm just not willing to do as God said do, or I'm just not willing to believe this or to do so. But this is the spiritual caveat to that. God doesn't do things arbitrarily. And so sometimes when our will goes against his will, there are consequences. And I'm not to say, God strikes you with lightning and punish you, but when you distance yourself from God, it makes perfect sense why you feel distance from God. So when you want to have you want to go your own way, God, it's not that God's punishing you, but God can't dwell with sin. So what you're feeling, that doubt that creeps in, is because you're not feeling his presence like you used to. But the reason you're not is not because he left you or he's punishing you, is because you have distanced yourself of your own will, of your own volition. So I think those are a lot of the reasons. So now what people will often do, it's kind of like a smokescreen, right? They'll raise an objection. That's not really the reason. I remember I was serving with RZIM at the University of Florida, and I had a talk with a kid for about 2 hours. And this is after the 1 hour talk. And we talked, and we went through some issues. I was giving him all the different answers and arguments. About 2 hours in, he finally raised the underlying issue of all the stuff he said. And it really had to do with his lifestyle. And he knew that the church would not approve of it.
Right.
He came back that night. We talked another 3 hours. And at the end, I was like, look, I won't say his name. I was like, look, I don't believe I haven't proven the case, but that's not the issue right now. So what I want you to do, and actually I gave him a copy of my book. I was like, go home, come back tomorrow and tell me, because one of the things he was saying is he didn't understand why God, if he's so powerful, had to come and die on a cross. He could have just, even though I explained theologically and philosophically the reasons, he was still using that as the smokescreen for the thing he revealed to me earlier.
Yeah.
Now, what I'm happy to say is I kind of kept in contact with him over the next year, and almost a year to the date later, in our text conversation, he let me know he's saved.
Oh, that's so cool. Very neat.
And it's amazing to me that we have to understand, not just as apologists, as Christians, as people of God, you may just be planting the seed, but be okay with that. What a lot of times we want is, I want to tell you the truth and see you flip your mind around, and now you're, ready to go for God. And it doesn't always happen like that.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I love about that story. I think that's so indicative of doubt in the church today, in that so many times, especially with young people, but really with anyone, we see these smoke screens of doubt, right? Like, oh, well, I don't know how God could have created the world in whatever, or and these scientific objections or whatnot, when in reality, if we actually get to know the person, and I think that's the hard part, because we don't actually want to get to know people, right? We want to have an intellectual conversation for an hour and then move on. But if we actually get to know them, we realize, oh, wait a minute, this person isn't really doubting God because they don't understand how evolution or whatever works. They're really doubting God because 6 months ago, their mom and sister died in a car accident, and they're distraught over how God could let that happen. And then once you have that information, you tackle that doubt and you walk with them through that in a completely different way. All of a sudden, you're not talking about science anymore. You're practicing Romans, the verse in Romans that says, "Weep with those who weep," right? And that's how we address doubt. So what? Go ahead.
No, that is rarely taught. And so I just finished my master's in apologetics a few months ago, and I'm not saying that that's what I'm not blaming anything about that. I'm just saying in church and apologetics, that part's rarely overly communicated, I'll say. It might be hinted at. And I tell everybody, because a lot of times if I'm giving a talk and people come away and like, oh man, you're so smart and you know all this, and I'm just not there yet. I'm like stop. Don't put pressure on. This is just what I do. That's not what everyone has to do. This is what God's chosen for me to do. So I had to go get these degrees and learn. That's what I have to do. You don't have to do that. The best way to do apologetics is relationally. And that's what I tell everybody, because so a lot of times if I'm brought in to speak at a church or a conference or whatever, like I fly in, I speak, and I'm gone. I can't build relationship with all those people. All I can do is hope that I dropped enough that they held on to, and I can hope that there's some kind of discipleship structure in the church that can keep the conversation going. But for the most part, I can't really control anything else after that. And so the beautiful thing, like with what you're doing on your channel, what I'm trying to do, we can kind of in some ways have an ongoing relationship or conversation with those who are watching and stuff like that. But it's hard. And so one of the things I was doing before the shutdown was I do prison ministry. So I go into Cook County Jail, and we go every week, but I went every 2 weeks, and we teach Bible study with those guys in their pod. And so over those years, I've built relationship with these brothers inside. So it's not just this, Christian coming to do his good deed. Like I don't treat them any differently than any other Christian I treat on the outside. You know what I'm saying? So that type of relationship, it takes time. You don't answer every question on one day in one sitting, but there's sometimes that pressure, especially as apologists, you want to, let's close the case. And I don't think that always is right.
Yeah, especially with that kind of emotional doubt. I mean, how do you close the case on someone who's experienced something so awful in their life? I mean, a lot of times they're how could God allow that to happen? Well, at the end of the day, man, I don't know. I mean, and that's the honest to God answer to a lot of these questions is I don't know, but I do know that he'll comfort you in a way that you've never been comforted if you'll let him. So I want to talk for a second about apologetics, and because so much doubt is emotional and whatnot. But I think apologetics can play a role in helping people walk through their doubt. Like the way I've always seen it is that you've got someone who has kind of this wall between them and really like a robust relationship with the Lord. Like maybe they know God, but they don't have this robust, blooming relationship with God. And they've got this wall, this brick wall, and they've got all these questions in that brick wall that's kind of keeping them from that relationship. And the way I see apologetics is a tool to be able to just remove a few of those bricks at a time by answering some questions. So what role do you feel like apologetics can play in helping believers walk through doubt? And what does that look like for the Christian, not just a Christian who's doubting, but to explore apologetics, but the Christian who wants to help other people who are doubting? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, that last point, I'll go there first, because one of the things, so we provide apologetics workshops that churches can host, and I don't want to say selling, but one of the things I tell pastors is trying to express the benefit of it is, and one of them is that we don't necessarily talk about a lot, is a lot of churches are trying to figure out how do we get out into the community, or how do we get people to come into the church or evangelize, or all these things, right? When somebody is so confident that this is true, they will be much better evangelists without you ever having to say anything. So for any pastor or church leader that's wondering about the value of it, first of all, it's a biblical command. So apologetics is not optional. I just want to reiterate.
Yes. Amen. Absolutely.
I've been trying to tell people that all year. But anyway, when you're kind of what we call a wishy-washy, I come on Sunday and, by Monday, I don't really want to talk to anybody about it. And mostly what I work with don't even know that I'm a Christian. Like that type of, to get that person to be more bold in their faith, probably is they have some of those bricks that you talked about. They're not saying it either because they don't feel comfortable saying it, or because they don't want to look like, oh, I'm not a good Christian, or somebody thought that I was more into this than I actually am. So they don't want to be exposed in that way, in which I can understand. I just don't think that's the healthiest place, because the promise that God makes to us is to have life more abundantly, to have a robust relationship with the creator of heaven and earth. Like when you think about it, that is a remarkable promise.
Yeah.
And so if I can have access to that, and I don't currently have it, then it would be to the benefit of any church leader to say, how can I help you get that?
Right.
So I forgot the first part of the question, but
no, that's good.
What I would say to tie it in is also because you're asking about the value of apologetics in helping someone navigate doubt or remove those bricks, right?
Yeah.
Here's my concern. At one point, I talked to church leaders in every state. This was several years ago, just telling about what we do and offering our services. And some had no idea, had never heard the word apologetics, thought I made it up maybe. But at one point I didn't know what it was either. So don't. But some, even with the statistics of, 65% of our young people walking away and all these different doubts and the different conversations that are being had and how it's being treated in culture, they said they didn't feel like it was necessary. And that's where I struggle, because even if you don't bring me or my team or whoever in, get somebody in there, because I promise you these kids have questions. Ever since these things were invented,
Yeah.
trust me, I'm saying as a former youth pastor, if I teach the best sermon, they can go home and Google. Actually, they're probably doing it while you're talking anyway. They can Google and find 10 different things that directly contradict everything you just said. And if one of those appeals to them, they'll go with it. Yeah. Unless you can show them why what you just said is true. Because it can't just be true because you said it and you're the authority. So this is the value of apologetics and the need. And I've had so there's about a month ago, I was speaking at a youth organization. And it's not just that they have questions. Their questions are deep and thoughtful. And I think a lot of adults and parents, you'd be surprised the level that they're thinking on, because you're not thinking that level.
Yeah.
And
yes.
Right. And like when we grew up, we didn't have Google. And so it wasn't, even if I had those kind of questions, it wasn't really a place to go to, deviate in those directions. So they're asking questions that are I got two emails from another thing I did back in October. This is a 16, 17-year-old kid. And like, I had to go to my library to get some answers for him, because it wasn't the type of off the top of the head type of questions he was asking. I was like, man, these are some real, like, why are you even thinking about that? How'd you even know that?
Yeah. But that's encouraging to me, right? Like it's encouraging to me that in certain churches, and I wish it was in more churches, but in certain churches, kids and young people feel open and free to ask those questions. Because I know a lot of people's church experience has been, I can't talk about my doubts, I can't talk about my questions, because basically I'm just going to be told that the believer isn't supposed to doubt, that I should pray more or read my Bible more. And I know for me, when I was struggling through a season of doubt, like, man, the more I read my Bible, the more doubts I had, right? Like that wasn't gonna help me. And yet I think it's sad that the church has so oftentimes unknown, and I don't think it's done with malicious intent, but it's just real dismissed doubt. And then, like you said, they've got an entire encyclopedia times infinity in their pocket where they can go get answers. And so they're either going to get answers from the church or they're going to get answers from culture. And I've found that a lot of young people, they're going to give the church the first crack at it, right? But if we don't take it seriously as a church and as pastors, then they're going to go to the world, they're going to go to culture to get those questions answered. And some of that's on us.
Yeah. A lot of it's on us. And one of the things, because a lot of times pastors will ask me, do you want it to be only youth, or do you want the whole church there? And a lot of times I want the whole church there, because I want their parents there too. Now, sometimes that's tricky, because then the kids don't feel open to ask certain things. So I do both, but we need to, and there's some great people that you and I know and have trained with, Natasha Crane and Jim Warner Wallace, and they've done a great job at addressing the parents and the children. So thankfully, these things are being done on a robust level. But you're right, that they're going to get answers. That no one in this day and age just leaves their question unanswered, because it's possible to get an answer. It's just the question, is it a good answer? So they're going to find eventually the answer that either satisfies them for the moment or is actually true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, and this is not a knock against pastors, what I'm about to say, but not just that some think it's unnecessary, because I've had other ones. They're like, yeah, man, we think it is great what you're doing, but our schedule's full. We have our prayer conference, our evangelism and it's like, I get it. I come from a big church. Now I'm at a small church that we've had. It's a house church, and so obviously it's small. So I get the bureaucracy that is necessary to keep that large machine running. And I'm not saying it's all bad. I just think that the most fundamental responsibility of a pastor is to make sure people are firm in their faith and being properly discipled. And this is part of that process.
Yeah.
You know, so I've heard some, the one I hear often that I still don't understand this objection. So they're like, yeah, Alex, we love what you're doing. My people aren't there yet.
Yeah,
Yep.
I've heard the same thing, and that's one. I guess I don't really know what you mean by that, unless your idea of Christian apologetics is like so lofty, but that's not what it is. And two, I think your people are there. I think you're selling your people short.
Oh yeah, I know for a fact they are, because there's been a couple of times that because I've had connection with people from certain churches, where the pastor's saying that, but your people are reaching out to me directly now. Right. So
right, yeah.
Something's missing here, and I've never, and this is not because I'm so great or anything like that. I have never gone and spoken anywhere in this country or anywhere at any church or any event, and had any person or pastor regret it or tell me, yeah, we were right, we didn't need it. What I've always had is, once I get done and then I did the Q&A and then I'm in the lobby, that's where it keeps going.
Right.
Because people are like, well, what about this? People have these, they're just, like you said, they're either scared to ask them or they don't believe that they can find an answer in that particular church. Now, that's a whole other issue. And so part of it is, if you don't have this quote unquote in-house, then reach out. There is so much stuff on YouTube. There's so many, there's so many of us nowadays that are available to help in certain areas if a church or pastor needs that. And I think sometimes somebody else told me this, that some, I'm not saying all, some pastors may feel challenged because they're not there and they feel like, oh, you come in and now people will look at you a certain way.
Right.
But remove the pride. It's not about that. I mean, not with me, not with you, not with anyone I know. It's not about that. I just want people to know what they believe and why they believe it. And I want people who don't yet believe it to come to believe it. That's all I want. That's all any of us want. And so telling me they're not there yet, you're treating them like kids, and they're not kids, and they're not your kids either.
Yeah, that's right. And like you said, it's not a pride thing. And honestly, pastors, your people don't expect you to be perfect. I mean, there might be those few people who do, but who cares? Most of your congregation, they don't expect you to know everything. Right. They expect that there's going to be areas that you don't know. And I want to say something to what you said just a second ago. And those watching who might be kind of in that season of doubt or asking questions and saying, you know what, my church isn't going to listen to me or whatever. I want to provide kind of an apologetic of pastors for a second. Give your pastor the benefit of the doubt. If you're sitting here and you're saying, oh, my pastors won't listen to me, but you haven't actually gone to your pastors about it yet, cut it out. Go to your pastor. Go to them and talk to them about what's going on and give them the chance. Because there are a number, unfortunately, too many pastors who will dismiss doubt and whatnot. But I don't think that's the majority. I think most pastors are genuinely interested in walking with you through whatever season it is you're going through. So before you kind of jump ship and go elsewhere, go to your pastor first and give them the opportunity to walk with you, because I think chances are you're going to be pleasantly surprised. Now, they may not have the answers you need, and that's where these outside resources like Alex are going to come in handy. But give your pastor a chance. Don't assume that they're going to dismiss you before you've actually gone to them with these questions.
Absolutely. Great point.
So want to kind of remind everyone watching really quick, we're about to segue topics, but if you have not subscribed to Alex's channel on YouTube, it's The Relentless Pursuit of Purpose. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So head on over there, open up another window, and go to his YouTube page, Relentless Pursuit of Purpose, and click the subscribe button. You can also head on over to My Doubtful Conversations and click the subscribe button as well. The last thing I want to talk about on the apologetics realm before we move into what everyone probably wants us to talk about, and that's some politics stuff, which I usually don't get into, but I want to a little bit here. What advice would you have, Alex, to pastors who really want to help their people walk through seasons of doubt in their questions and whatnot, but they don't know how to do it? What advice would you give to them?
So, a couple things. So, kind of on a macro level, I think, and I've been talking with several different pastors throughout the country over this last few months, almost in a counseling kind of way, because I think we all need to re-examine our ecclesiology. In other words, the way in which we do or have done church. And so what my hope was, and we went live right at the beginning of this, maybe back in March, and it was kind of on that topic, like, look, this is an unprecedented time, and I don't want to glorify it. Obviously, people are sick or dying. So, but if you're not, then this is an opportunity to re-examine how you've done what you've done and why you've done it. Is it in line with the original vision that you had? There are some things where I don't think we should all just, especially as church leaders, be, hey, I can't wait till things open up. I can't wait to get back to normal. Well, what if we're being given an opportunity to redefine normal, where we can reassess and say, hey, this is something that I hadn't even thought of because I've been so busy trying to keep these things going and this ministry going and keep the budget and all that. But now that I can kind of sit back and take a high view of everything, what is there anything I'm missing? And I think one thing that a lot of places, as we've been talking, are missing is, are we really getting those bricks removed in people's hearts and minds? Is there any questions that we have not addressed, that we've sidestepped? Is there any issues that people are struggling with and they're finding their answers out there instead of in here? And if so, why is that so? So take a step back, re-examine why you do what you do. And I think that's the one steps. Now on the personal level, on the micro level, enter into those conversations and relationships with people. And once again, you don't have to have every answer. Even I don't have every answer. We don't have every answer. Now I can probably figure out where to get it, but people respect that too. What they don't respect is you blowing them off and making them feel stupid for asking the question in the first place. So I would say, hey, that's a really good question. I hadn't thought about that. Here's some initial thoughts, but let me go get some more clarification and I'll come back to you. And now that person feels validated for asking their question. See, one thing that indirectly is communicated when we blow off questions is that we aren't fully certain. And that may not be your intention to communicate that, but that's kind of part of what's heard. When we're growing up and our parents are like, don't doubt, just believe, and don't ask that question. That means, A, you don't know the answer, and it probably means you're not completely certain either. You're just kind of going on that blind faith. But the thing is, our faith is not blind. And I tell people a lot like this, that if I can figure out 80 to 90%, that I'm certain about a thing, I go with it. That's reasoning to the best inference. So most people don't know how a plane works, but when you get on the plane, you fall asleep and you trust you're going to get where you're going, right?
Right.
You don't require to know all the mechanics to trust the system. Everyone, atheist, Christian, whoever, we all do this every day in life. We go when we have 80%, 90%, maybe even less certainty, and we put all of our trust and or faith, whatever word you want to use, in that thing. So it's possible to have meaningful knowledge and not have exhaustive knowledge. Don't feel like you're required to know every single answer. Don't feel like a person having a doubt in a specific area means they don't have enough knowledge or faith to believe, because they may very well believe, but it may be a certain situation that has happened in their life. And once you help them get the proper perspective on that, then they say, okay, all right, yeah, I get it now. God is still God. He's still on the throne. I just had a moment.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of times that's what it can be. You answered a question and they're like, okay, that satisfies me. I'm back to that 80% of belief and 90%. And I get it, but this, and I think probably atheists do this more than Christians who are doubting, this standard of, if I don't know every answer to every question, I won't believe anything. You don't do that standard in any other area of your life.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And if you and I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and I forget who I heard this from, but it's not original from me. But the idea is that if you leave Christianity because you have unanswered questions and doubts, what you're doing is you're leaving Christianity for another worldview, atheism, whatever it might be, where you're also going to have unanswered questions and doubts. So like doubt isn't a Christian problem. Doubt is a problem of our finite minds, right? It's not Christianity. It's everything. And so you're never going to find that level of Cartesian certainty, that 100, you're just never going to have it.
Right.
Is there a chance I'm wrong? Well, of course, there's a chance I'm wrong. I don't think I am, because if I did, I wouldn't be a Christian, right? I think I'm right, which is why I'm a Christian. But this pursuit for 100% certainty it's fruitless.
It is, and it's hypocritical. I see a lot of things on social media, as we all do, and so there was actually. It wasn't an issue, but there was something posted in a group I'm in where it's parents of kids at at my kid's school. And so that was the reason I didn't respond, because I just, sometimes you got to know when to bow out of the fight. Right. But what they were saying was so antagonistic toward religion, but also so hypocritical. Now, really, for me, I'm used to people bashing religion and Christianity, that part, and I can deal with that too. But what I really wanted to address, because a lot of my, even if I do go do the PhD, like a lot of it's about logic or the foundation for logic and philosophy and stuff like that. And so I want to point out the illogic of your logic. The reason my conference is called The Proof of the Truth is because I always start from there. Is truth a reality? If it is a reality, how do we determine it? Like, there's actual mechanisms. There are coherence and correspondence, and I won't go into all that. But there's a methodology for how to arrive at truth. Do you have justified true belief? Do you have a warrant to believe? So all those things you learn in philosophy, and as you go through these courses, I think the general public needs just some basic training in logic and reasoning. Yeah. Because especially with the tolerance thing, I tell people this is not a theological problem. This is a grammar problem.
Right.
In order for me, if you say, hey, Alex, I think red is the best color, and I say I agree, I'm not tolerating you. I agree with you. Right. A prerequisite for tolerance is disagreement. So you can't call me intolerant when I disagree with your opinion.
No, that's good.
Right? All you can do is give me an opportunity to tolerate the opinion I don't agree with.
Yeah.
But what you don't do is that, and what you do is call me intolerant, and then you make it antagonistic, where now you're not being taught. So it's just it's this circle where you don't even understand. They miss the hypocrisy in it, and face to face or in certain situations, I'll point it out, and that just wasn't the right form to do it. But we see that stuff all the time, right? This is just so hypocritical. So, like you said, an atheist has just as many unanswered questions. I was watching some years ago on Real Time with Bill Maher. He had Neil deGrasse Tyson and Dawkins on there, and asked all the questions. I think a lot of people have seen this clip. And he said, "What's the one thing you really want to know the answer to?" And Dawkins, in his field, he's like, "I want to know the origin of the first self-replicating organism." And Neil deGrasse Tyson said the same thing. Now, between the two of them, I think they have 5 degrees, both brilliant men, but they have not just unanswered questions. The most fundamental question is unanswered. The most fundamental questions are unanswered, because from that whole worldview, you can't tell me from that worldview, if you're going to be honest with it, what's the meaning of life, or if there is one. You can't ground morality. They'll say they can, but you can't. So like these are not just like ancillary things. These are fundamental to me being able to live a successful life issues. Yeah. So yeah, for all those who think, well, I doubt over here in Christianity, so let me run to this. It's a losing situation.
Yep, you're in for it. So there's a comment that we got that I thought was really good and really interesting. Carl says, doubt is more so curiosity. And I think that's interesting to me, because I do think that those two are closely related. And yet I think there's a difference. I think what we're talking about today, there's a difference between doubt that someone's experiencing and like just a level of curiosity as to why something is the way it is. Do you want to touch on kind of your thoughts, kind of that distinction between those two things?
Yeah, and hey, Carl, I spoke at his church last year or 2 years ago.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, they had the Faith Defenders Conference, and so in some ways, I think it can be curiosity, because there could be things like, like I believe God did it, but I'm just wondering, like, how did he actually do it? So there can be that, but then there can be the doubt of, I don't see how God could have done it, so I don't believe he did do it.
Do you think doubt? Do you think curiosity can lead to doubt? Like, do you think curiosity can be dangerous because it can lead to doubt, or do you think it's a good thing? Like, where are you on that?
Sometimes. So. And this goes back to the other issues. So if you're curious, and then you start looking for answers, and you start asking your pastor, and you're getting brushed off, and then it leads to doubt, that's when it becomes a bad thing. But it's not really because curiosity is bad. It's because it wasn't handled properly. So if anyone's curious, so somebody asked me a question today in one of our groups, and we were talking about what was it about? Something regarding the validity of the names in the New Testament and something like that. So I answered, but then I also provided 2 different books as resources. So like, if you're really curious about this, I don't have the time to give you an hour-long treatise,
right?
But there are people who have devoted their entire life's work to just this issue. Right. We have specialists in apologetics, and some, like I'm going to be interviewing Dr. Hugh Ross on Monday.
Oh, very cool. Awesome. Congratulations.
I can't wait. He's a specialist, and he's probably the world's best specialist in astrophysics. So I'm going to ask him about that. And then a few weeks ago, I had an archaeologist. I'm only going to ask. So there's people who have devoted their entire lives to specific areas. And what I try to do, and I think what you try to do, is kind of like, I'm not really the specialist in any one particular area, but I try to have enough from all the different areas to be able to help as many people as I can. But I do think that's a good point, that sometimes doubt is just curiosity, but if you let it fester, I think it can become dangerous.
Got it. I would agree with that. Well, let's go ahead and in the last few minutes that we have here, I want to talk about politics, and let me kind of tee that up and kind of where I want to go, because this is something when it comes to doubt doubt may not be the right word, but we'll call it that. But when it comes to just kind of frustration amongst believers in the church, here's what I've seen a lot of, especially over the past 4 years, but it even extends beyond that, is this frustration with, and I'm just going to call it this, and if this offends some people, I'm sorry, that's not my intent here, but I think it's the easiest way to communicate. I think a lot of Christians are really kind of put off and done with this whole idea of Trump worship, right? Of this idea that the church has, not every church, but American Christianity has so kind of coalesced around this personality who's in the Oval Office, that has some very obvious character flaws and whatnot, that have been exposed, right? And yet so much of the church seems to be so devoted to him that it gives the impression that to be a Christian is that part of being a Christian is devotion to not just Donald Trump, but to the Republican Party. And one thing that I appreciate about your channel, there's a lot of things I appreciate about your videos, but one thing I appreciate about your channel is that you touch on issues that might be uncomfortable to a lot of believers, because it's not like the typical conservative Republican perspective, but perhaps it's the biblical perspective, right? And I've always said, like, if your theology aligns completely with one political party or the other, then you're probably wrong on some things, right? And yet, I think a lot of Christians are kind of put out by this implication that to be a Christian means you basically have to be a Republican. And you're up in Chicago, and I know that there's probably a lot more political diversity and whatnot in the church up there. But down where I am, in South Texas and whatnot, that attitude tends to kind of creep up some. So what would you say to Christians who are kind of struggling with this whole, like, well, can I be a Christian if I don't identify as a Republican, or if I've got like some different perspectives on certain issues? Like, how do we navigate the political world?
Yeah. Well, the simple answer is yes, you can be one and not be a Republican, because many that I know aren't. And I know there's some hopefully fringe Republican Christians that would say, well, then they're not really Christian. I don't think that's the majority of what people in that, camp, or so to speak, would say.
Yeah, yeah, and for the record, I would agree with you. I don't think the majority would say that, but I do think that I do see how someone could perceive that, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think it's said by a lot of people that you have to be a Republican and love Donald Trump in order to be a Christian, but I do see how the climate and the political atmosphere within the church can suggest that to someone. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was just getting started.
Go for it. I will mute my mic. You've got the floor.
No, so this is touchy, and I think it's probably less touchy now that he's kind of officially done, whether he believes it or not. So here's what I'll say. Not for everybody, but in some ways, it's a very hypocritical position to hold, and this is what I mean. When you branded yourself as the party of family values, and most obviously those things I agree with. I agree with the views on abortion and family, that we agree on those things, and I think you would find most Democratic Christians or independent Christians agree with those things as well. The difference, particularly here, is this has become something other than what it used to be. So I was telling somebody the other day, I was like, I miss the days where Democrats and Republicans just argued about taxes or healthcare, or, whatever. This is not that anymore. This is a whole different, it's not even political anymore. This guy, Trump, has said some of the most vile and tweeted some of the most vile things that anybody has tweeted. And he did so as the president of the United States. Like, can you think of any other president that could get away with what he's done and said? Like, just everybody just pause for a second. And so if the answer is no, then why are you giving him a pass? And this is where the struggle comes, because now especially as an African American, like even if I'm with you on certain things, and let's say you voted for Bush, I didn't, and so that's fine. We're cool. It's not a big deal. But the level of allegiance specifically to Trump and not the party, now I got to kind of look sideways because I'm like, you're doubling down when he has said, why are we getting all these people from S-hole countries? And why he said, I mean, I can't even go through every day. It's a new thing. And in spite of everything, you double down your allegiance for him. And now I'm like, so it's hard for me to look at you as my brother or my sister because you don't care. We talk about weep with those who weep. You're not weeping with me. I've wept a lot this year. I know a lot of African Americans have wept a lot this year, regardless of what anybody feels about George Floyd or Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, all these, regardless of how you feel. You have actual brothers in Christ, sisters in Christ, who I didn't know those people, and I didn't weep every time, and it kind of caught me off guard, even the times I did cry. But it's you don't understand the continual psychological trauma that goes on, especially when, for those who are more educated, when you know the history of everything that's happened and transpired. And it's not I'm not saying to blame anyone. I'm just saying just hear us out. Just be there. Just listen and call him out. Call Trump out when he says these things. Don't look the other way, because I guarantee if Obama had said or done any of these things the other direction, it would be a field day. I mean, it would be, I can't even imagine what would happen. So now you've made it not about abortion or pro-life. You've made it about him. And out of all the people, at least in my lifetime, that have been president, some I agree, some I don't agree with. Out of all the people that have been president in the last 40 years, the level of allegiance to him supersedes all of them. And so my question is always, why him? I've heard other people look at him as like the second coming of Jesus. Like he is God's chosen, like this guy. I just don't see. And so the only thing I can come to the conclusion of, and this is not just me, this is a lot of people, and I don't want to speak for the black race or whatever, but it looks as if that you agree with the things he's saying. And so you talk about how it looks from the other side, like from our side, I don't want to say our side, but from the other side, from my perspective, it looks like you're not just saying, oh, well, he's going to get these laws enacted and we'll just look, we don't like what he's saying, but we can't do anything about it. It looks now that it's not that. It looks that you actually co-sign what he's saying. Mm-hmm. And that's what's troubling. That's what's kind of even scary sometimes, where you're not even, oh man, I wish he would be a nicer guy. I wish he'd be this. That's what I used to hear people saying, but now you've co-signed him so many times. You've doubled down so many times. You still have Trump 2020 on your Facebook logo. Like you've gone to the extreme so much. Now I have no choice but to question our brotherhood, and even question, not that I have the right to or have the ability to put you in any place, but to question your allegiance to Jesus, because the level that some people have elevated him to, and as you call it, kind of Trumpism, where there's a fundamental issue that we don't have time to really delve into all the way tonight, but the kind of Christian nationalism that has been embedded always in this country, but he has brought it to the forefront. And here's the thing. I don't know how anyone, like if I didn't know, and I don't know if he is or isn't, but I have my doubts. You shall know them by their fruit. I don't even know that he is a Christian. He knows how to cater to a certain group. And that should be troubling. I think that should be troubling to anybody, even if you co-sign him, even if you want him to win or wanted him to win, that should be troubling, that he doesn't really believe what you believe. And he just knows that if he caters to you, then he'll get your vote or he'll get your allegiance. And there's so many, this is the tip of the iceberg of the issues, but I would just here, let me bring it back so I don't get all the hate mail. So I would always start obviously with the Bible. What does the Bible instruct us as far as our character, as men and women of God. I think character still counts. I think leadership is important. I think leadership should not be party centric or ethnic centric. And so I just refuse to believe that if the Holy Spirit is actually living in me or in a person, that the Holy Spirit, that he won't cause me to act in certain ways in certain directions, especially when I've been told that my actions are hurtful. I just don't see that makes God null and void. If I'm actually saved and the presence of God is actually in me, there will be fruit. There's no way around it. Either God is real or he's not. And if he is, then there's going to be evidence of that. And so I struggle. Once again, I'm not God. I can't look at the heart, but I've seen no growth. I've seen no fruit. I've seen no change. I've seen no repentance. I've seen no mercy. I've seen no grace. So what do I do with that as a Christian? Yeah. I'm sitting here telling my people in the church, and I'm trying to pastor and disciple them and get them to grow. And they're looking to the leader of the country who's a Christian, and they don't see any of it. How do you even go to your church and preach that same message of discipleship when they're not seeing it from the highest level?
Yeah. Well said. I think that's very, very well spoken. And I think that leads to the question of like, how do we do this better? Like, how do we as believers, how do we navigate these differences better? Let me use this as an example. So let's say you have someone who says, I like, on one hand, I absolutely cringe when Trump or whoever, but Trump says something that is pretty obviously racist, right? But on the other hand, how can I support a candidate for president who is going to put justices on the Supreme Court who are going to uphold a case that allows the murdering or the killing of millions and millions of babies a year? And so I think a lot, like, how do we navigate this? How do we on one hand say, no, this is not okay. The president's silence on these racial issues is not okay. The church's silence on a lot of these issues is not okay. But on the other hand, we also need to stand up for this other, like, it's so sticky and messy and there's no clean lines. What do we do with that?
Yeah, I think part of it is exactly what you and I are doing now. So let me share a couple wins that I've had this year, because it's been in some ways a good thing, because he has unknowingly brought a lot of things to the forefront. People have put their cards on the table this year. And so now a lot of people who they were kind of like in their head thinking certain things, but then to your face, now it's not in their head anymore. Everyone has pretty much put their cards on the table. And so in some ways that's a good thing, because I can deal better with, knowing that you don't like me than if you're pretending to like me. At least I know where you stand. So that's one thing. Now, the other thing, I think the Bible gives us clear directions on how to do these things. Part of it is we got to come together and talk. So you and I coming together and talk, I've had other conversations where I reached out to people responded to my posts on certain things, and it actually led to conversations and messenger texts and all these different things. And so they've remained cordial by and large. And so I think if Christians, because let's all remember, I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat, the president, whoever the president is not your God. He's not your king. He's not your God. Jesus is still on the throne. So we as believers, as churches, as children of God, we have to come together in dialogue. Because a lot more stuff happens on a local level than happens on a federal level anyway. And if we come together and say, you know what, the Christian position is we do not believe in abortion. We don't affirm that type of thing, but we also don't affirm racism, and we also believe that we should take care of the poor and the marginalized to the best of our ability. So like, it's almost like we set a mandate, and we submit this as like, if you want our vote, Republican or Democrat, this is what we want collectively, because the Bible is very clear. And so if we're all reading the same Bible, we should not get different conclusions on these fundamental issues. Now, there's tertiary issues we can talk about later, but the fundamental issues, it's pretty clear that what Jesus wants from us as kingdom citizens living a kingdom lifestyle here on earth, that there's not a lot of debate or room for debate for that. So we have to get unified. The reason Jesus prayed in John 17 for unity is because that will be the thing. It's really the only thing that can get us a hearing. It's the only thing when people see, if it could happen, there's roughly a third. So let's say 2.3 billion Christians on earth. What if all of us were united in these basic fundamentals? The world would have no choice but to take notice. They'd have no choice but to take us seriously. But when you go to this church and they say one thing, and this church and they say a different thing, the world has no idea what to think. And it's our fault. So there's actually what's it called? The AND campaign. And I met the founder. His name is Justin Giboney. And literally that's the idea behind it, because I've always struggled with this. And you said it at the beginning. If your theology aligns perfectly with any party, you probably got it wrong.
Yeah.
So the AND campaign says it's not this or this, it's this and this. This is me personally. I'm not saying for anybody. I don't like guns. I don't say take your rights for bearing arms. I'm not saying take it away. I'm not that guy. I'm just saying I can be pro-life and be against guns. I can
Amen.
be, I can be against the death penalty, and I can be, I don't know what the other side. Like I can be, I can have. If I'm thinking clearly, I will be like that. To be honest with you, because nobody is that kind of monochromatic. You have differences of how best to express the totality of the gospel. But that's our starting point, is the gospel. How is anyone gonna believe that this is good news when you're saying it out of a racist mouth? You see what I'm saying? We can't. It's never going to be communicated that way. So I think those are the starting points. We have to talk.
Yeah, bingo. I think that last phrase there encapsulates it all. We have to talk, and I don't know about you, but even before the pandemic began, so much of our dialogue was Facebook chats back and forth, and that's not helpful at all. But now that the pandemic's begun, 95% of our communication with one another is commenting on videos like this and having a back and forth in comments. And yet, like we said earlier in the show, you can't get to know someone that way. You can't get to know someone's heart. We can't discover whether someone who made a very insensitive comment really believes that, or just doesn't really know how to communicate these things, right? And yet that takes having relationship with people that we might not have really ever had a relationship with before. And yet, for what I hear you saying is the only way to better our dialogue around politics and around our differences is to actually have a dialogue.
Absolutely. Most times, at least on the higher level, it's this: Democrats yell from their side to this side, and Republicans yell from their side to that side. They're not even talking to each other. There may be, like they go in the room and they have a meeting, but for the most part, you yell your talking points, I'm gonna yell mine, and whoever's loudest wins. I mean, it's not a dialogue. There's no conversation. The other part is, as you said, with social media. So I made a joke earlier this year, which I thought it was funny, but
I think I remember this, but go ahead.
You remember it? Yeah, I think
so. I think so.
Yeah, and it went viral, and I'm like the stuff that I actually want to go viral, the stuff I produce, I'm like, why can't that go viral? but it was because there was all day long. It was I think Sean King had said something, and Anyway, it's about white Jesus, just in case anybody wants to know. So if you're any kind of historian, let alone apologist, hopefully, or pastor, hopefully you know that Jesus was not white, blonde hair, blue eyes, and hopefully you also know he was not Black African like me. So I had to dispel. I said roses are red, violets are blue. Jesus was never white. The end. Like, I thought that was a joke.
Yeah.
But so it was at the end of the day. I had seen all this stuff, and I posted it, and I went upstairs to get some water, and I came back, and it's like 75 comments. I was like, what the heck? Like, so most of them were the haha emoji, and then some were like, some were like, yes, he was. And I'm like, well, you have never read a book, obviously. And then some were like, well, he wasn't Black. I was like, I never said he was Black. First of all, it was a joke. And I literally, half of my responses were, it was a joke. It was a joke. It was a joke. But the other part with social media is people feel so much tougher behind a keyboard. So when I speak somewhere, even if somebody's antagonistic, not because I'm an imposing figure, it's just, you won't say certain things to my face that you feel very comfortable typing. Right. And so social media has allowed people to be so much more vile than they already were, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And then coming back, when you have your president equally being vile on social media regularly, like, how can you tell other people not to do it? So it has amped up everybody to feel, we call them internet thugs. You're tough on the computer or on the phone, but you're not in real life. You'd never say that to my face. And I'm not trying to be a tough guy. I'm just saying you wouldn't do that. Now, what will probably happen is we get done, the talk is done or whatever is done, and then you'll approach me one-on-one later and ask your question or make your comment or say you didn't agree. And I've had that happen. And it's actually pretty cordial, even if they vehemently disagree with my opinion, because that's the normal way most of us communicate.
Right.
Most of us aren't that mean. And the other part is some things do, as you kind of alluded to, do get taken out of context. Like, there was some study that showed from every level of communication how much less you're actually understood. So from like the verbal to an email to a text, like, so the farther down you go, even if you had no ill will intention, the likelihood of you being taken out of context increases exponentially. And then, so you mix that with the fact that some people actually are mean, and it's a powder keg. So we have to, I can't wait for everything to open back up so we can have face-to-face dialogues again. And, hopefully that'll help the healing.
Yeah, you can only hope. And like you said, I have an uncle who served in Congress back in the 70s, and he talks about how he was a Democrat turned Republican, and would talk about how, like, they would get into these really big debates on the floor, but afterwards they'd all go out and have drinks together, and they were friends, and like go into each other's kids' baseball games and stuff like that. We just don't do that anymore. And there's I wonder if the part of the solution is reminding ourselves that we are all created by God to serve a very special and unique purpose, and God loves each of us exactly the same, right? And when we see each other, when I see you as a son or a daughter of God, it's much harder for me to say something negative about you or to be mean to you or belittle you, because you're a son or a daughter just like I am, right?
Absolutely. That and I've been using this example a lot lately because it's kind of fresh. So for those who don't know, I tore my tendon here. I was doing some weightlifting, and I had surgery last month, almost a month ago to today. And so I've been in physical therapy recently, but prior to that, I couldn't, and I still can't raise it very high. And I'm getting my strength back. Now, when I injured it, I tend to handle pain pretty well. And so since I could still do stuff, I was like, okay, maybe it's just a sprain or a tear. And it's, cause I didn't understand, cause I've torn other ligaments and like, I couldn't do anything. So when I went to the MRI, I went to the doctor, and he said, this is one of those tendons you don't necessarily need for day-to-day function, but you'll never be able to really lift weights again or do active stuff. So I'm a, pre-pandemic, I was a pretty active guy. I played basketball and tennis, and I still want to do those things. I'm not old, so I'm like, I don't want to live the rest of my life like this. I want to. My kids are still relatively young, so I do want to get back to whole. Now, so when we talk about weep with those who weep, I think this is the proper way that we should think about what you just said. Not that it was wrong, just this is a good example. We're part of the body of Christ, right? You, me, everybody else, or all other Christians. I didn't say to myself, oh, well, I have another arm, so who cares about that one? When I broke my fingers, I've injured myself a lot, just so you know. When I broke my fingers, I didn't say, oh, I have 7 more or 8 more. I said, no, I want my entire body whole. If we are the body of Christ, then if something is wrong with you, it should affect me. Not in a physical way, but in a way that I care about it. Yeah. And I want to do the best that I can possibly do to help. Maybe I can't do a lot, but at least I'll pray for you. I can do something. But what I can't understand when I especially in a year like this, with a president like this, so many of my brothers and sisters in Christ, when I'm saying something, and I'm not this one out here complaining every day and posting everything, and I did march, but I don't condone rioting, so I'm not like that out there with it. Like you said, you don't talk a lot of politics. I don't either. I do have certain feelings, but regardless of your agreement, if I'm telling you that another part of your body is hurting, you should care about that.
Amen.
That's all I'm asking.
Yeah, I think, and I think Paul, when he talks about in 1 Corinthians, when he uses a body analogy, that's a part of it for sure. And yet it all, like you were saying earlier, and like I was alluding to as well, it all goes back to like, are we actually going to invest into one? Like, are we going to actually talk? Are we do what we're doing right now? Are we going to have these kinds of conversations, right? And put it out there for people to see and learn from one another. My wife and I had a conversation with really close friends of ours and about some of these issues, and it was very honest and very open, and I think we all learned a lot about about who we are, and I think that's important to have those conversations with each other.
Absolutely.
So we are at 9:15, 9:20, and I'm sure you, like me, have to get kids to bed and all that kind of stuff. So we'll go ahead and we're gonna have to go ahead and cut it short here. But Alex, I hope I hope you'll come back on sometime soon. I'd love to, especially continue our conversation on race and politics and whatnot. I just think it's the elephant in the room right now, and it's the thing that it's one of the things that is causing so many issues in the church that no one wants to talk about, right? And so I think continuing to talk about it is very helpful. So I hope I'm going to invite you live to come back on again, and it'd be awkward if you said no. So you should.
I'm already saying yes. I'm on record.
Like I said earlier, Alex has a YouTube channel, The Relentless Pursuit of Purpose, also a Facebook page, I think by the same title, correct?
No. So Facebook, go to my it's Proof for the Truth, the Facebook page that is probably most pertinent here.
Awesome. So go there, check out his book, Blueprint for Bible Basics. Alex is doing a lot of really good stuff. You can Google search his name and then put apologist next to it, because if you just Google search his name, a website comes up for a guy who's like an author in England or something. I don't. He's got your name.com, I think, and so I realized that's not him. So Google search him, and they can contact you, I'm assuming, on your Facebook page.
Yes.
You can be reached there. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Alex, for coming on. I think we had a good conversation, a good
That's
dialogue,
great.
and
Thank you.
opening up those channels. So remember, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, Doubtful Conversations, please head on over to YouTube and subscribe. YouTube, Alex knows, gives us unlocks features the more subscribers you have, and it just makes it easier for us to reach doubting Christians. And also, if you are struggling with doubt or have any questions that you would like us to talk about on the channel, shoot me an email over at doubtfulconversations@gmail.com, and I'd love to answer some of those as best as I can, or at least give you resources to walk with you through those things. So thank you for joining us. Those of you who hung in there with us live, I hope to do more of these soon. This is actually pretty easy and pretty fun, and there's no editing on the back end, which is fantastic. So
Nope.
thanks, guys, for watching. Thanks again, Alex, for joining us, and y'all have a wonderful evening. God bless.
All right. Thanks. God bless.